RMDs have a reputation they don't entirely deserve. If you spend any time reading about retirement, you've probably come across some version of the same warning, a warning even we've given you in the past. Required minimum distributions are a ticking time bomb. The IRS is going to force you to take money you don't need, push you into a higher tax bracket, and derail everything you've spent decades building. I've been helping retirees work through this for a long time, and I can tell you that the story is mostly fear-based, dressed up as planning advice. For most retirees, RMDs are very manageable. Some years they're barely even noticeable. The panic tends to be based on rules that haven't been accurate for years. I'm Jason Solomon, the president of Tactical Investment Advisors. Let me show you what's changed, when RMDs genuinely become a problem, and what to do about it. Start with the standard deduction, because this alone changes the math significantly. 2017, a married couple filing jointly got a standard deduction of $12,700. That number is now over $32,000. It's more than doubled. What that means in practice is that a larger slice of any required minimum distribution is sheltered before you calculate a single dollar of tax. The first chunk just disappears from the taxable column. On top of that, the brackets themselves have shifted. The old 25% bracket that got caught a lot of married retirees has now been replaced by a 22% bracket. The income threshold before you hit it moved higher. For married filers today, you can have $100,000 in taxable income before you cross into the 22% territory. More shielded income, friendlier tax brackets, both working in the same direction. And then there's the timing. Secure Act pushed the RMD starting age from 70 and a half till 72. Secure 2.0 moved it to 73. And now if you were born in 1960 or later, RMDs don't start till you're 75. That's more years of additional runway, more time for accounts to grow, more time to do strategic conversions if they make sense, and more time before you're required to do anything at all. And when you start taking distributions, the IRS updated its life expectancy tables in 2022, which reduced the required withdrawal percentages. So at 73, the old table required about 4%. The new one is closer to 3.77%. On $1 million IRA, that's about $2,000 less that you're forced to pull out every year. None of this means that RMDs can never be a problem, because they can. But the situations where they genuinely hurt people are more specific than most people realize. The clearest danger zone is a large pre-tax balance relative to what you spent. So if you've got $3 million in a traditional IRA and your lifestyle costs $60,000 a year, your RMDs are going to generate taxable income well beyond what you need. That's a real thing. But it's also visible years in advance, which means it's something you can work on. Roth conversions during the lower income years before distributions begin can gradually reduce the balance that drives those future RMDs. You're not trying to empty the account. Just shrink it enough that the eventual distributions land somewhere reasonable. The second situation that warrants concern is what I think of as the widow's tax problem. And it catches people off guard really more than anything else that I see. I dealt with it today. When a spouse passes away, the survivor files a single rather than a married filing jointly tax return. The deductions compress, the brackets compress. An RMD that was perfectly comfortable for a couple can suddenly push a widow or a widower into 24 to 32% tax bracket on the same income in the same retirement, just with different paperwork. That's a real planning problem. It's also one you can address years ahead of time if you know how to look for it. If you're watching this and wondering what the widow's scenario looks like for your situation, that is exactly the right question to be asking. This is the kind of analysis we do with our clients before it becomes an urgent problem. If you want to map out what that looks like for your specific numbers, the link below will get you on my calendar. I hear one other common concern constantly. Taxes are going to skyrocket, so we need to get everything out of our pre-tax accounts right now. I understand this instinct, but the certainty in that argument isn't supported by much. Tax increases are politically difficult. What tends to happen over time is a mix of bracket adjustments, inflation effects, and policy tweaks, not dramatic across-the-board tax increases. Future tax law could look like almost anything, and that uncertainty isn't a reason to ignore the future, but it's also not a reason to make expensive moves based on predictions that may not pan out. Speaking of expensive moves, every dollar you convert to Roth creates a tax bill today. That's money that isn't in your portfolio compounding. If you convert $100,000 and pay $22,000 in taxes to do it, you need the math to work out over your actual time horizon. For some people, it does very clearly, but for others, when you run the numbers, honestly, accounting for the growth, the taxes paid, your brackets now versus later, and whether or not you have heirs who'd benefit from the inherited Roth dollars, it gets murkier. This is not a decision where the right answer is the same for everyone. So what does a reasonable approach look like? First, look at your numbers. Pull your current pre-tax balances and project forward at a reasonable growth rate. What do your distributions look like at 73? What do they look like at 78? What about 83? A lot of people who do this exercise find they've been dreading something that adds maybe $15,000 or $20,000 in annual taxable income. It's not that that's nothing, but it's not a disaster. Second, if you're in a lower income period before distributions begin, and a lot of people in their 60s are, use it. Small conversions each year, filling whatever room you have before the next tax bracket, can gradually chip away at the balance. You're not trying to convert everything. You're just keeping the eventual distributions in a range that you can manage. Third, if you're charitably inclined, qualified charitable distributions are worth knowing about. Once you're 70 and a half, you can direct money from your IRA straight to a qualifying charity. It counts towards your RMD, but it never shows up as taxable income. If you're already giving, this is almost always the better way to do it. Fourth, the widow scenario. See what happens to the surviving spouse if one of you passes away. Does their tax picture get dramatically different? If it does, that's worth addressing right now, whether through insurance, conversions, or a different withdrawal approach, rather than just leaving it as a problem to solve under duress. Here's the bottom line. RMDs are a rule, they're not a trap. The deduction is bigger than it used to be. The brackets are friendlier. Distributions start later, and the required percentages are smaller. If your balance is large relative to your spending, there's planning to do. If a surviving spouse scenario creates real bracket exposure, that's worth addressing. But for most people, once you look at the real numbers under the current rules, the anxiety doesn't match up with the math. If you want to map out what this looks like in your situation, with your balance, your timeline, and your spending, there's a link below to get on my calendar. We'll see you in the next video.